Last time, I told you the truth my son finally admitted: the debts, the gambling, and the loan sharks who threatened us both. I told you how he sold my home, not just out of desperation, but out of fear. Fear that dragged us into a darkness I never imagined. But today, dear ones, I will tell you how it all ended. How I faced the final days in the house I had loved for half a century. And how I made a choice that changed everything between me and my son. The 30 days dwindled like sand through an hourglass. Each morning I woke, I felt the weight of time pressing harder. I walked the rooms with my hands brushing the walls, whispering silent goodbyes. The kitchen where I had stirred countless meals. The living room where I had rocked my babies to sleep. The porch where my husband once held me close as the sun went down. Every space felt like a heartbeat, fading. My son kept quiet. He moved about the house like a man walking through ruins of his own making. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with a look I couldn't read: guilt, regret, fear. He tried to help me pack, but I waved him away. "These are my memories," I told him. "I'll put them away myself." But the nights were the hardest. I lay awake, listening to the stillness. And in that stillness, my mind replayed every moment: the moment I found the papers, the moment he admitted the gambling, the moment he confessed the danger. Betrayal, fear, heartbreak. It spun in my chest until I couldn't breathe. One night, unable to bear it, I rose and went to the porch. The moonlight bathed the roses in silver, and I knelt down, touching the earth my husband had once dug with his bare hands. My tears fell silently onto the soil. "I don't know how to let go," I whispered into the night. The next morning, I made a decision. If I had to leave this house, I would leave it on my own terms. I wouldn't be pushed out silently, like a thief sneaking away in the night. I would face it. I would claim my goodbyes. So I began to gather the neighbors, the old friends, the church ladies who had shared laughter and tears with me over the years. "Come over," I told them. "One last time, let's sit in this house together." And they came. The living room filled with voices, with stories of years gone by. They spoke of dinners shared, of birthdays celebrated, of the times my husband had fixed their fences or carried heavy boxes without being asked. The air was heavy with memory, but also light with love. My son stood in the corner, silent, his eyes downcast. He didn't join in, didn't speak. I could feel the weight of his shame pressing on him. After they left, I turned to him. "Did you hear them? Did you hear what this house meant to people? It wasn't just wood and brick. It was a life, a family, and you traded it away." His eyes filled with tears. "I know, Mum, and I'll never forgive myself." I stared at him, my own heart torn. Part of me wanted to hold him, to comfort him as I had when he was small. But another part of me wanted to scream, to push him out, to let him feel the full weight of what he had done. Instead, I said softly, "You may never forgive yourself, but the harder question is, will I?" His breath caught. He didn't answer. That night I sat at the kitchen table, writing in my notebook again. Only this time, I wasn't writing letters. I was writing my story. Every detail, every heartbreak, every truth. Because one day I knew I would need others to hear it. And as I wrote, a strange peace began to settle in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. The house would be gone. That much was certain. But my voice, my truth, my memories, they couldn't be sold, no matter how much money changed hands. And on the final day, I would speak those truths aloud. Dear ones, stay with me, because the next part is the hardest of all. The day I left the house, the words I spoke to my son, and the decision that defined the rest of my life. You must hear this. The final week arrived like a slow funeral march. Every box stacked against the walls felt like a coffin, carrying pieces of my life. The photographs came down, the curtains were folded, the shelves emptied. With each task, the house grew colder, quieter, like it was already forgetting me. On the last morning, I rose before dawn. I wanted to see the sunrise one last time from the porch. The sky blushed pink and gold, the same view I had shared with my husband so many times. I clutched my shawl tightly around me, whispering, "Goodbye." When I stepped back inside, my son was waiting. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. He looked at the packed boxes, then at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," I said simply, "but I don't have a choice, do I?" We loaded the last boxes into his car. Each trip down the steps felt like tearing another stitch out of my heart. The neighbors watched quietly from their porches, some waving, some wiping away tears. They had known me in this house for decades, and now they saw me leave it behind. Inside, the house was bare. The echoes of my footsteps bounced off the empty walls. I walked slowly through each room one last time. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and soap, even without the dishes and pots. The living room felt cavernous without the furniture, but I could still hear the echoes of laughter, of Christmas carols, of my children's voices. Finally, I stood in the bedroom where my husband had taken his last breath. I touched the wall where his chair had stood, whispering a prayer. "I'm leaving now, my love, but I will carry you with me." When I returned to the living room, my son was standing by the door, holding the keys. He looked like a boy again, lost and afraid. "Mom," he whispered, "I never wanted this." I stared at him, my throat tight. "You may not have wanted it, but you chose it." He winced as if I had struck him. "I'm sorry." I stepped closer, my eyes meeting his. "Sorry isn't enough. You didn't just sell a house. You sold the place where your father lived and died, where I built a life for you. You took away my safety, my dignity, my peace, and no amount of apology can undo that." His lips trembled. "What do you want me to do? Tell me and I'll do it." I shook my head. "What I want, you can't give me. You can't give me back the years. You can't give me back your father. And you can't give me back my home." He lowered his head, silent. For a moment, I almost softened. I almost reached out, the way a mother always does. But then I remembered the lies, the secrets, the papers with his signature. And I knew that some wounds run too deep for easy comfort. I took the keys from his hand. They felt heavy, cold. I placed them on the kitchen counter, the last act of surrender. Then I walked out the door. On the porch, I turned one final time. The roses swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the light. I bent down, plucked one bloom, and held it close. A piece of my husband, a piece of the life I was leaving behind. As we drove away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. But inside, something had changed. The house was gone. The past was gone. What remained was the choice of what to do with the pain. And though I didn't know it yet, the decision I made next would define the rest of my life. Dear ones, this was the day I lost my home. But what came after was even harder. The choice of what to do with my son. Do I forgive him, or do I let him go? Stay with me. Because in the next part, you will hear the words I finally spoke to him, words that ended everything between us, or maybe began something new. After the house was gone, we stayed for a time at a small rental apartment on the edge of town. It was nothing like the home I had left behind. Thin walls, creaking floors, the smell of strangers lingering in the hallways. I unpacked only the essentials, a few clothes, some dishes, the photo of my husband I kept on my nightstand. The rest stayed in boxes, because in truth, I couldn't bring myself to open them. My son tried to act as though life was moving forward. He cooked meals, paid the bills, even cracked forced jokes to lighten the air. But the silence between us was louder than anything he said. One night, as we sat in that cramped living room, I finally spoke. My voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of months of silence. "You think the worst part of this is losing the house," I said quietly. "But it's not. The worst part is losing you." He froze, the humor draining from his face. "Mom," I pressed on, "I look at you and I don't see the boy I raised. I don't see the son who once ran home from school with stories spilling from his lips, who hugged me without hesitation. I see a man who lied to me, who chose secrets and shame over trust, and I don't know if I can ever see you the same way again. His eyes filled with tears. He leaned forward, gripping his knees. I was scared, Mom. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd look at me like a failure. I thought you'd stop loving me. I shook my head slowly. Do you not understand? It wasn't the truth that broke me. It was the lies. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I don't know how to make it right. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Maybe you can't. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he whispered, Do you hate me? The question pierced me. Hate? No, I had carried him in my body, raised him with every ounce of strength I had. A mother cannot hate her child. But love, I realized, could be buried under grief so heavy it almost suffocates it. I don't hate you, I said softly, but I don't trust you either. And without trust, what are we? He looked at me, his face pale. Don't say that. But it was the truth. In the days that followed, I kept to myself. I went on walks alone, sat quietly in church, tried to rebuild some sense of life in this new place, but everywhere I turned, I felt the absence of what had been taken. The sound of my husband's laughter in our old living room, the smell of roses blooming outside our porch, the warmth of a home built with love, and always I felt the shadow of my son's choices following me. One afternoon, I came across the notebook I had been writing in. Page after page of pain, betrayal, memories of what had been lost. I read through them, my tears blurring the ink, and then I wrote a single sentence at the bottom of the page. I must choose, carry this pain, or lay it down. That evening, I called my son into the room. He sat across from me, wary, as though bracing for another storm. I need you to listen carefully, I said, because these may be the most important words I'll ever say to you. He nodded, his hands trembling in his lap. I drew a deep breath. You broke my trust. You took from me something I can never get back, and I will never forget that. But I will not let your choices turn me into someone bitter, someone who can't love her own child. I will not let this betrayal define the rest of my life. So here is what I choose. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry this poison inside me any longer. Tears streamed down his face. He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Don't mistake the two. I forgive you, but that doesn't mean I trust you. Trust has to be earned, rebuilt brick by brick, and that will take time, if it's even possible. He nodded slowly, his sobs breaking the silence, and for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but a release, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, I slept for the first time without waking in tears. Dear ones, I ask you this. If you were me, would forgiveness come easily, or would the wound remain too deep? Write to me in the comments, because your voices guide me through this journey. But stay with me, because the final part of my story is not about losing a house, or even forgiving my son. It is about what I discovered afterward, about the life I built from the ashes of what was taken, and perhaps about hope. After I told my son I forgave him, a strange stillness settled over us. He wept that night, wept like the boy he once was, and though my arms ached to hold him, I stayed still. Forgiveness had been given, but trust was still broken, and I knew it would take time before I could bridge that distance. The days moved slowly in that little apartment. I unpacked some boxes at last. My husband's photo found its place on the dresser, the worn quilt I had sewn years ago draped over the bed. It wasn't home, not in the way the old house had been, but it was a beginning. And in the quiet of those new walls, something unexpected happened. I began to discover myself again, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman who had survived. I started walking every morning, breathing in the fresh air, letting the sun touch my face. I joined a reading circle at the church, where women my age shared books and laughter. For the first time in months, I laughed too. My son noticed. One evening, he said softly, "You seem lighter." I looked at him, studying his face, the weariness that still clung to him. "Because I've realized something," I replied. "The house was never the only home I had. My home is also here." I touched my chest, in the memories, in the love I carry, in the strength I didn't know I had. No one can sell that, not even you. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time, there was a quiet gratitude in them. Slowly, he began to change. He sought counseling, joined meetings for people fighting addiction. He started working steady hours, repaying what he could, piece by piece. It wasn't a miracle, and it wasn't quick, but it was something. And I began to see glimmers of the boy I once knew. The boy who used to run barefoot in the yard, who once whispered, "I love you, Mum," before bed. Months later, I went back to see the old house. The new owners had painted it a different color, changed the porch, cut down my roses. It hurt, yes, but as I stood across the street, I felt something I hadn't expected, peace. Because I understood now. The walls were gone, the rooms were changed, but the memories remained mine. My husband's laughter, my children's first steps, the countless dinners and holidays, they lived in me. No one could take that away. I turned to my son, who stood beside me, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes downcast. "Mum," he whispered, "do you regret forgiving me?" I took his hand gently. "No," I said, "because forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to live beyond it." He looked at me, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, hope. And as we walked away, I felt a quiet strength rise within me. Yes, I had lost a house. Yes, I had been betrayed in a way I never imagined. But I had not lost myself. And that, dear ones, is what carried me forward. So here I am, at 72, telling you this story. Not because it is easy to relive, but because it matters. Because betrayal and loss come to us all in different ways, and sometimes they feel unbearable. But I want you to know, you can survive, you can forgive, even when trust feels shattered. You can rebuild, even when the past has been torn from your hands. The home may be gone, but my story remains. My voice remains, and my strength remains. Dear ones, I want to ask you, from the bottom of my heart, if you've ever had to start over after losing everything, how did you do it? Tell me in the comments, because your strength helps carry mine. And if my story touched you, I ask only this: share it with someone who needs to hear that even in the deepest loss, there is still hope. Thank you for walking with me through my pain, my anger, and my forgiveness. You've been my companions in the hardest chapter of my life. And now, together, we close this story.